Davion Mitchell's scouting report. He's a national champion. He was one of the best players on Baylor, arguably the best player on Baylor. He averaged 14 points, 2.7 rebounds per game, 5.5 assists per game, and he shot 51% from the field and 44% from three. So, Riv, just talking to you, how do you feel about Davion Mitchell, and what do you think are his strengths, his weaknesses, and a pro comparison for him?
Well, for starters, the first thing that pops out to me for Davion is his work ethic. Coming in, he didn't start off at Baylor. He had to work and gain his shot. And even then at Baylor, developing a jump shot, not like a knockdown shooter, but developing a jump shot, hitting twice as many threes as he hit in his first two collegiate seasons at Baylor last year. I think that's impressive. So to start off there, his work ethic is impressive. Now his strengths, he has an NBA body. I feel like he is short, but his physique, his strength, he has an NBA body. His handles are pretty firm for his position. He's strong. He kind of has, handles. He can create off the dribble. He can create off the bounce. So I think that's what's going to help him in the NBA. His strength. He can finish with contact. He can body down low. He kind of gives me an Eric Bledsoe vibe a little bit. Now, his weaknesses obviously are his height, his age. And with age, people are confused about it. But in the NBA draft, people look at age because a lot of these guys, he's a lottery pick. And a lot of teams in the lottery are picking guys based off their age and their potential. I think with Davion Mitchell being 23 already, he's kind of going to have to be at a team that's, if they're not a championship team, a playoff team at least. I think that's a team where he can contribute the most at. But his weaknesses aren't really much. I wouldn't say he's a point guard. He's more of a combo. He's not a guy who can run your offense. He does. I don't think he has that ability at this moment. Granted, his work ethic is amazing. He can improve in that, but I don't think he can be a primary playmaker like Cade can for an offense, or even Sharif Cooper. I think he's more of an off-ball scorer, or a guy you put in a situation to go get a bucket, whether it be in a pick and roll or it be in an ISO situation. So I think, in the NBA, he's going to have to find his role within the Lou Will concept, coming off the bench, be a six man, just that scoring spurt. But I don't think he can start on the NBA team at this moment.
You mentioned it. He needs to go to a team that's ready to win right now. And the teams that stick out to me are Golden State and Memphis. They just moved into the top 10. They have the 10th overall pick now, I believe.
Yes.
And Davion Mitchell, we talked about yesterday that in Memphis, he's a perfect fit culturally and play style wise because he's a great defender. He can space out the floor and he could relieve pressure off of Moran because Davion Mitchell, he's not a point guard, but he can facilitate and create for others from time to time. And I think Memphis is a great fit. But then there's a question of whether Memphis moved up to 10 to draft a guy in Davion Mitchell who's not going to be a starter because a backcourt of John Morant and Davion Mitchell is way too small. If they draft Davion, I think it's for him to be to Memphis what Jordan Clarkson is to Utah, a spark off the bench and a consistent bucket off the bench. That's pretty much it. But in terms of his strengths, I think his shot creating ability sticks out to me the most. His passing is pretty good. It's not all worldly great, but it's okay for who he is as a player. I think he's a better passer than Jared Butler. When I watch Baylor, I see Jared Butler more as a two guard, and he's the guy that his assist comes from kickouts, and they aren't really flashy passes. I see Davion Mitchell make more impressive passes than Jared Butler. His on-ball defense is phenomenal. He was making life hell for Cade Cunningham when they faced them. Even though Oklahoma State came out on top, it was mostly due to the fact that they were switching Davion Mitchell off of Cade. Oklahoma State was forcing a switch, and Cade was attacking everybody, whether it be Mark Murphy or Maceo Teague or Jared Butler. He was giving them the business, but Davion Mitchell did a phenomenal job. And I think just his defensive IQ, his ability to take charges, to me, he reminds me of Donovan Mitchell in terms of his shot creating ability, but has Pat Beverly's defense. I think he has the type of toughness on defense. The problem is that Donovan Mitchell has a 7-foot wingspan.
And his
Donovan
bounce.
Mitchell is way more explosive, is way
Yep.
more athletic, has a better vertical, is stronger than him as well. Those are things Davion doesn't have. And those are things that make Donovan Mitchell what he is. So without that bounce, without that size, because Donovan Mitchell is 6'1", 6'2", but he looks like he's 6'4", 6'5" because of his 7-foot wingspan. But Davion Mitchell, he doesn't have much size to him. He has a short wingspan, an insanely short wingspan. I think it's a 6'4", 6'5" wingspan. So he has very short T-Rex arms. And his strength may not translate because when they faced Oklahoma State, Davion was able to push around Cade Cunningham because he was stronger. But you're 23 years old. You've already developed your strength pretty much. In the NBA, when you're facing grown men, are you going to be able to be or look as strong as you looked in college versus these pros? That's a big if. So I think Davion Mitchell is an interesting player, but there are a lot of question marks. And whether a team wants to take him in the lottery is a big question mark because his ceiling is limited.
I think, and like touching on Donovan Mitchell a little bit, I think what people fail to forget is he was a project. You know, he wasn't supposed to be this guy right away. He was a late, if not late lottery pick, he was right after the lottery. And he wasn't supposed to be this great. I think the work ethic, they kind of have the same type of work. I think the work ethic is what's going to keep Davion Mitchell in the race. But you mentioned it. Memphis would be a great spot for him. You know, that tough grittiness. Memphis, he reminds me of the old Memphis teams too. That toughness, that grittiness, that style of play. He fits that perfectly. I think another team you didn't say was Indiana. You know, I think Indiana being at their starting five is probably locked in for a while. I think that backup point guard spot or that backup two guard spot is still in question. You know, Aaron Holiday is still trying to find his way into the league. Jeremy Lamb, who got hurt last year, you know, I think bringing in Davion Mitchell can fill that spot when Brogdon sits down or Levert sits down. You need that spark plug. You need to keep that offense flowing. So I think, yeah, Memphis, like you said, I forgot the other team you named. Oh, Golden State and Indiana. I think those are three teams that can definitely use a guy like this who can come in, produce right away. Because I do think he is one of the most NBA ready prospects, but I don't think we're gonna see all-star from Davion Mitchell.
And Davion Mitchell was somebody that I had slipping in the draft. I don't think he's going to go top 10. I had him slipping in my original mock draft to 17 to Memphis.
Mm,
And ironically, Memphis moved up to 10. And I doubt it's for Davion Mitchell. I think Moses Moody for them would be a better option. Josh Giddey, James Bucknight, if he's there, Keon Johnson, and I'm blanking out on another name. I'm hoping you can help me out. He's a playmaker. He's a primary playmaker. We were arguing about this, whether it's Josh Giddey and somebody else. I forgot who it
I
was.
think it was Gideon Moody. We were going
No,
no.
it's another. Okay, yeah, I think it was because the five prospects I think Memphis is looking at right now are Josh Giddey, Moses Moody, Buck Knight, Mitchell, and Johnson. Those are the five that I think they're looking at right
Yeah.
now. I ultimately do think they're going to go Josh Giddey, but we'll see. But yeah, like Davion Mitchell to me, I think he's a starter in a league. I think that's his ceiling, though. I think his ceiling is a starter, and based on just his weird fit in the NBA in terms of like he's 6'1", but he's not a point guard. He's probably a starter on a bad team, not a
Mm,
very great team. I think on a great team, on a playoff caliber team, he's that six man. He's that spark plug off the bench. And it's mostly because of his age and also because older players were not sure how they're going to translate to the NBA, especially with his skill set because he does rely so much on his shot creating ability. But if you take away those college defenders and now you place him in the NBA where he's less athletic, he has a shorter wingspan against these better athletes, it's going to be a tough time.
yeah. One thing about him though, his foot speed on defense, you know, his quickness is very NBA ready. He may not have the wingspan or the height, but he can keep up and keep in front of defenders. So that's something that's going to keep him at bay. And, you know, like you said, you know, Pat Bev, that's one of his comparisons on defense. Pat Bev is able to stay in front of guys, keep in front of guys. We saw in the playoffs, he made it very tough on Devin Booker, and he made it at times tough on Donovan Mitchell, guys who Devin Booker being have about 5 inches on him. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think Davion Mitchell, that's a good comparison on defense, but Pat Bev can't create his own shot. Davion can, which is why he could be a starter for a team that has an established star.
Pat
For
Bev
example,
starter.
if a team has Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, you put Davion at the one. That's perfect because he gives you that defense. He's a floor spacer and can go out and create his own shot. I'm trying to think of other teams like the Lakers. You know, there are
Boston.
certain Boston. There are certain teams that fit Davion Mitchell, but in the lottery, most of these teams are still searching for a star. And because of that, it's hard to slot Davion Mitchell in the lottery. If he was like projected between 15 to like 25, it'd be much easier for him for to slot him in on a team like the Knicks, for example, who need a
The
point
Lakers.
guard. Exactly, the Lakers, the
And
Clippers.
one thing about the lottery is a lot of these teams have point guards already. So that
Exactly.
just kind of putting them in a hole too. You know, even the Warriors, they have a point guard. The Pelicans somewhat have a point guard. Sacramento, they have a point guard. Memphis, I can go on and on. So it's like even Cleveland has their established guard. So a lot of these teams already have that position filled up.
Yeah, that's why it's going to be interesting to see where Davion Mitchell falls because in our mock draft, in the pick aside mock draft, Andrew picked Davion with the 11th pick
He
to
made a lot of
Charlotte.
picks. He made a lot of
Yeah,
picks.
yeah, to Charlotte. A lot of people said that he shouldn't be a GM. He'd
Yeah.
get fired. But he picked him to go to Charlotte. And maybe, thinking about it again, maybe that's not too bad, even though I think they need a center because Cody Zeller is not that guy at the 5. Davion Mitchell off the bench could be a spark plug if they lose Devontae
I mean, but
Graham.
we kind of see a Davion Mitchell sort of in Terry Rozier, though, for being honest. You know, they're kind of
Yeah,
like
that's
the
true.
same guy.
And
So,
they
and
already have
Devontae
another
Graham.
guy. They have another guy who's similar to Davion Mitchell, doesn't have the defense, but in Malik Monk off the bench, who's a restricted
Devontae
free
Graham,
agent.
too.
Yeah, so they have those guys. That's why it's weird where Davion is going to fit. I want to see where he goes. I think it's very possible he does slip because a lot of teams are going to say, where are we going to place him? Do we want to take a top 10 pick on a guy who's not a star or doesn't have star potential and is probably like a spark plug off the bench? It's going to be weird to see, but I think he's gotten a lot of hype because of the March Madness run and the tournament run and the championship run, and deservingly so. But I think I don't want to compare him to Jimmer Fredette, but I'm about to. Is that Jimmer Fredette? He got all this hype and then he became a top 10 pick. He went 10. He went to Sacramento, and his career fizzled out because it was just a bad fit for him. Davion Mitchell, if he goes to the wrong team that is kind of like in rebuild mode,
Hmm.
we can see this guy as a trade chip to go to different places, and then his career can get lost within a couple of years because he's always been being moved around.